All right. Hello and welcome to another edition of Magus Talk. Today we have Dr. J straight from the Sonora Desert. He's going to tell us about his experiences with the array of jinn or spirits of the Lesser Key of Solomon. And in this system, what we do is we essentially tune into, maybe summon isn't the right word, but we tune into and gradually summon the essence of these spirits. They can work on us and we can work with them, not to manifest something specifically at this point, but to upgrade our own energy body, our own psychic abilities, our own karma, shall we say. Level 1 is the psychological level of working. Level 2 is the level of relationships where actual occult effects with other people and the immediate environment occur. And level 3 is the Jungian, archetypal, collective unconscious. There is another level beyond that, but that's beyond the scope of these discussions, at least for now. Dr. J has some experiences with dreams and with synchronistic or coincidental experiences in real life. And these kind of tie together because the man's out in the desert. This desert, if you are psychically sensitive, you can feel the energy and you are prone to have experiences. Let's just say that the boundaries between the seen and the unseen world blur. And thus the boundaries between the dream world and the real world also blur. They do not blur in a psychedelic or disorienting manner, however. They blur just enough so it may lead to our own psychological upgrade or psychic upgrade or magical ability upgrade and our ability to deal with the human collective field, which is usually at the level of the subconscious. So you'll see through his accounts how this works. But before I go into anything deeper or go off on one of my extended commentaries or rants, if you will, let me hand the mic over to Dr. J. Tell us about your experiences, Dr. J. We'll see how we can comment and understand for the audience and clarify, shall we say, your own interpretation.
All righty then. Here I am, the Sonora Desert, surrounded by cactus trees, and they're like trees. Just loving it out here. Seriously, everybody needs this kind of time. So anyway, here I am in the desert, enjoying myself, and feeling the energy. It's like I can't talk about it enough, so I'm just not going to talk about it at all. It's just really awesome out here. So, to keep everyone up to date, hello Ari, hello Tara. Wow. Great to hear your voice again, Tara. So anyway, the coolest thing I've seen out here is a desert fox, which I've never seen before. Cutest little animal ever. And I think he's still coming around. I don't know why, but I can't see him. I don't want to get too woo-woo and too psychic, but I can kind of feel him. That, and I can see his scant, periodically, because, it's just fox scant. You can, just look it up online. So, I saw him when the moon was full, and, the sun went down, and the moon came up really quick right after that, and lit up the ground. Everything was silver. And so the fox looked silver. I'm not really sure what color it was because, again, it was moonlight. Short little legs, cute little face, and just a big, long, bushy tail. It's just great. He came out from, into the moonlight and noticed me, and he ran behind this bush. Now, I'm in the desert, so there's not a lot of cover out here. So anyway, he goes behind this bush, and I walk up to this bush because I'm curious. Is he just hanging out in this bush? And so I looked, and it's like nothing. Okay, this is a bush in the middle of nowhere, all right? No cover around it. He just slips behind the bush, and I'm looking at the bush the entire time, and he vanishes. God, I love these animals. I've seen little coyote mixed breeds do the same thing. I'll tell you what I'm talking about real quick and then move forward. But, sometimes these people will bring their pets out to the desert, and when a coyote wants to mate, if there's no other coyote around, she'll just mate with like, someone's Pomeranian or something like that. Well, that's exactly what happened. Not in this place, but anywhere. There was just, little army of coyote Pomeranians at one place where I was camping. They were just masters of the shadow. They were like cute little ninjas. And they, I learned that I have to go to the nearest tree. There are trees out here. And then, hang up my trash because they would just rip into it and scatter it everywhere. But anyway, okay, back to the reason why I'm making the soundbite. And again, let's not forget about this desert fox, because I think that ties into a dream. Anyway, I've had a series of dreams. I'm not going to go into the details because it's not really all that important, but just dreams of being unprepared. And I'll give an example of one of those dreams here in a little bit, but a series of dreams in just being unprepared. Also, I had a dream of a big spider about the size of my torso, a little smaller maybe. And it hooked onto my back, and it didn't hurt, but it was like, of course, terrifying because it's a giant spider. Who wouldn't be afraid of that? And he's clinging to my back, or she's clinging to my back, whatever. And it's on her legs. You've got these hooks. Again, it didn't kind of like that first Spider-Man way back in the day, where I think you just saw his hands had Peter Parker's hands had tiny little barbed like hairs growing out of it. Just imagine that, and that's what the spider had, and that's what the spider was like, clinging on and piercing my skin, but again, not really hurting at all, but just being, of course, frightening. So there's that. Ari, you may want to take time to comment.
Don't mind if I do. Your dream is telling in more ways than one. But before we get into that, let's look at the desert fox experience. Because here you have something that blends the inner world with the outer world. This fox obviously was real, and it obviously disappeared from your vision. So there's a logical explanation, I'm sure, and I'm sure you didn't hallucinate the whole thing. But if you look at the real experience, like I said, symbolically, as if it were a dream, and then you can look at your dream as if it were a real experience, but not quite, you kind of get that no man's land interface or bridge between the underworld and normal world perception, where it's almost like a razor's edge, but not quite. It's where shamans dwell. So you're in the desert and you notice an animal that many would say, oh, this is a guide, this is a spirit guide. But where is it leading you? It's not leading you to a bush. What it's telling you is that the moon is also a symbol of this. It's telling you to open up your perceptions, and it's not doing it like, well, hi, I'm your guide, and I'm here to show you this. It's telling you that, look, you can feel my vibe here. I'm obviously in the moonlight. You can't see my real world color. As far as you're concerned, I'm silvery moonlit fox. And you can see me, and then you can't see me. So let's go invisible. Let's enter the dream time. And of course, the next experience is not going to be some miraculous vision or something like that. But when you have the dream that night, you're still in that mode. So foxes symbolically are spirit guides in the dreams. And when you see them in real life under conditions that can correlate with the interpretation. This also depends on our own discernment, of course, but under these conditions, it's almost obvious, to somebody who has gone through things like that multiple times, such as yourself and me and Tara. at least. And I'm sure sensitive viewers out there may have had their own experiences. Now, in this zone, the fox is pointing to something, so this isn't going to be a normal dream. You're not scared, but you also have the attitude or the conclusion that so you're almost being warned, or time is running out, or you have to prepare or take precautions. This means that you're being ushered into something. It doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. It means that you are now capable of dealing with whatever you needed to deal with. Before you enter level 3 in full, you kind of need to clear out the zone from levels 1 and 2. You've already done this in the past with your work with the jinn before, but it almost consolidates it because there's an effect that I believe I've described in previous podcasts that whatever you deal with in life and you think you've overcome, shall we say, well, I've overcome this psychologically, this isn't an issue for me. But then I'm confronting other people who, even if they don't trigger me, they remind me of this. Or they bring about circumstances that almost try to um, evoke or manifest situations that did trigger me in the past. The source of this is probably level 3, the collective level. You're absorbing more of that pattern, only at a different level. So as you're absorbing it, you're dealing with it where you're familiar. You're dealing with it in your psyche. You're dealing with it in your relationships with other people. So we don't enter the Jungian collective subconscious as its own realm off the bat. That's an experience in and of itself, and we kind of need to build our own psychic potentialities and strengths and abilities in order to handle that kind of thing on its own merit. What we do, though, because we're familiar with it, is okay, now I know how to deal with this psychologically, and I know how to deal with this in my relationships and both together using occult means, psychic means, mystical means, or however we address these things. The issue is that you have a spider, which can represent many things. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But a spider is a primal force of the web of life. And it's also a force, like you started saying he, and that almost referred to an identity with yourself where you were connected to the web of life, and then it turned into she. Now, in your own mind, of course, it's like, well, spiders can be male or female. They're most likely at that size, the female is bigger than the male. However, symbolically speaking, from the vibe I get, and again, we're talking occultism here, so woo woo is part of the process. But at the same time, let's try to keep the woo woo structured so it is comprehensible and we don't come off like we're saying whatever we feel like without really having the rational part of our minds have a say in it. So there's continuity in the reasoning here. And it is that the spider was an uncomfortable experience that can even have to do with the jinn Baal. Now, Baal connects us to the web of life. He has 66 legions, and legions represent the action. This is what I consider like Kabbalistic gematria. This is a number value. And in Kabbalah, numbers can be translated into letter forms, and letter forms or combinations of letters can be translated into numbers. So 66 essentially represents a connectivity with a network, you might say. That's how, and I'm not going to get into the details of Hebrew analysis like that, and people may nitpick if they're into that, but let's just say that the 66 represents our own connection, our own living connection to the network of life and being and experience that surrounds us. So Baal helps us on a personal level to deal with all of these things and instigates a certain internal transformation to be able to bolster our behaviors, our attitudes, and our dealings with at the personal level, at the relationship level, at the collective level. And this is one thing. However, at the same time, you have a kind of feminine force that, whether you like it or not, has just jumped on your back. and you're carrying it. So you're carrying this, I wouldn't call it a burden, but you also mentioned Spider-Man, and the reference with the little hooks was from the first movie. And all of these things are swirling in your unconscious as they have relevancy here. And Spider-Man is a superhero. So the spider that bit Spider-Man and gave him his superhero abilities is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was an uncomfortable thing. And it is an inconvenience because with great power, as that comic says, comes great responsibility. And those who are familiar with the zeitgeist of the, shall we say, pop culture are familiar with this kind of thing. And Jay's a big fan, and I'm a big fan of these kind of pop culture guy type tentpole movies. And who isn't, who wouldn't be in American culture at least? So what I'm saying is that the spider represents a karmic challenge. It's not necessarily vampiric, but by its very nature, you haven't owned it. It isn't a spirit familiar as yet. You haven't transitioned into being able to carry that kind of thing. And the experiences are telling you two things. They're telling you, and usually that's what they do, they tell you what afflicts you, and they tell you what your challenge is in the sense of how it can empower you. Many things we consider challenges and bad things in life have things to teach us. They're not just lessons so we can learn, but they're and not only opportunities, sometimes we have to go through them if we want to make it. And if we and when we're undertaking our own internal development, it almost becomes like a have-to zone, especially when you're dealing with things in life that will make you or break you. And even though it's not that drastic all of the time, when you deal with this kind of work, it's serious in that manner because you're going out into the wilderness, and the wilderness, shamans do not beat around the bush, just like the fox didn't beat around the bush. So we have word plays going on as well. All of these things we take into account as we strive to understand what's going on around us, because with the jinn, instead of being entities that give us things or tell us what to do or whatever, they open up the signs and the portents of the unseen world so we can figure it out as we can. And usually they will do this because, to my knowledge, others are not addressing the system in quite this manner. Many are addressing the entities as something to connect with intuitively or psychologically or inspirationally or perhaps without the ceremonial. And many so-called seasoned occultists, modern occultists, would decry that, would say, no, that's not the right way. You only have flimsy effects. But you only need flimsy effects. Here we have an organized dynamic, a systemic approach where you take full advantage of this so-called weak link. However, the weak link is what will make you stretch your psychic ears, your psychic eyes, your psychic heart to be able to be open more to what's going on and sensitize yourself more to the unseen world without being thrown about like a leaf in the wind, because these subconscious forces can affect us if we allow them to accumulate without some digestion and without some processing. So this is a vision quest of sorts that Jay is on. And no, I'm not reading into this. I'm reading it. And of course, vision quest, any kind of vision quest you listen to, it's not usually always a dramatic thing that will impress your friends or will impress people who aren't into such things. However, let's go even deeper. The spider connects you to the web. It connects you to your own internal network of energy. That connects to the environmental network of energy. And that connection tells you that you're playing in an arena that you need to take seriously, in the zone of those who have ears to hear, so to speak, will listen. So it's telling Jay to listen. At the same time, having a spider on your back, which has venom, is not a pleasant experience, and you want to harmonize it. So you're not out so much to transform the spider itself, but you're definitely out to come into an alignment with what it represents so you can be on the right side of nature, so to speak. You can be on the right side of the underworld, to borrow a phrase from activism, so to speak. The thing is, though, that the right side of the underworld is something that is not apparent to us. And we need to sensitize, and not only sensitize, but purify in the sense of confronting our issues and confronting our issues in a way where we come to terms with how we engage with them. We don't have to resolve everything. And this is what Jay is doing right now. So let's see what more his dream has to say, because obviously there's some additional material here. So Jay, please continue.
Okay, so we got the fox, the spider, and a series of dreams of just being unprepared. And this coupled with just a large amount of rage. Now this is not, I've felt uncontrollable rage before, and this is not it. But it's definitely a vampiric rage, because I'm just rehashing things that have already happened that I'm in my life that I'm really angry about, and things that haven't happened yet. But if they do happen, I'm going to be angry about them. Basically, it's just kind of like a loop of being angry when there's really not a reason to be angry. And it's annoying because it is preoccupying. But what I try to do is, of course, work through the emotions, blah, blah, blah. But also to how do I say this? To almost use the rage to like cast a spell, for lack of a better word, to where what I am angry about never happens, because there's a chance it could happen, and it's not important what it is, because again, so just casting a spell and feeling into that rage and making sure it gets resolved before it ever happens.
All right. I remember your issues, Jay, with rage from before. And this is exactly where the spider in the dream comes in. Because the spider, you see, when we interpret these things, you don't just interpret off the bat, you see how it kind of unfolds. You go from real world signs to dream signs to real world signs, and then you blend all of these things together because they do have continuity. That's the whole point. They're not random events. Then you would call it woo woo and misinformation or whatever, but it's not the case here. So follow the pattern and see what happens. Jay has been doing that for years, and it's benefited him. So trial and error at this point, there was very little error, if any. And the signs always lead to something. So in this case, the spider's saying, look, most likely I'm a manifestation of the jinn, but at the same time, not a pleasant one. Because the jinn isn't a spider, of course, but because it connects to the web, and if you look at the sigil, and if you look at some of the drawings in the Lesser Key of Solomon, or the drawing of the jinn, which to me isn't really accurate. However, there's still an intuitive, the one who drew it had some intuitive sense of the jinn's connecting ability or spider-like ability, because the sigil itself does look like a kind of water bug or a water spider. So this connection leads to something, and it says the following, that all of these preparation or something's coming or may come or be prepared. Essentially, this is saying that the jinn, it's saying that the rage that he's experiencing is coming from that connection. The rage is coming from the outside. Something is causing it. So the rage is not some flip out zone of triggering. It's more like a defense mechanism. And the defense mechanism is something that has a reason behind it. And there's another dream too that Jay talks about because he'll say something here following my commentary, and we're going to do that. But and I'm going to go directly into that where he basically describes this other dream that kind of clarifies it even more because there's stuff in the air, and Jay needs to prepare for what's in the air. And like he said, well, you can prepare and you can so what you think is going to happen or is threatening to happen will not happen. And the preparation need not be necessarily external, at least not completely. Most of it can actually be internal, and then externally you go through certain expressions in real life, and these are enough. So in this zone, this rage, like he said, the spider seemed vampiric, or the rage seemed vampiric, not the spider. So the rage vampiric means when somebody's got their hooks in you, somebody acting through the spider, affecting the influence of the spider instead of being some other form that's more gentle, let's say. But this is a raw type of experience. So he's connected to this, and then something is draining his energy or draining his experience or compromising him. And the rage is our attempt, or his attempt, to be liberated from that. So let's look precisely at what Jay is suggesting right now. And at this point, I'm not going to apologize, but please heads up. He's out in the desert, the wind is blowing. There's most of the noise, the background noise cannot be filtered out. At least I don't know how to do it. So just take that as part of the authenticity of the podcast. So Jay, tell us, what do you exactly suggest now that your next account is going to be like?
All right. I am going to do something a little different. Ari, I hope you're okay with this. If not, then let me know. But I'm going to send a soundbite, and then you can just let everybody listen to it of it's just a soundbite of me waking up in the middle of the night and making a recording of a dream. I just think it's entertaining. But because this is totally unscripted. Obviously, I just woke up, and so I'm just describing a dream. The detail that I left out of this said dream is Yuki was in the dream briefly. Now, I think Yuki, she's a good friend, but she's not a major part of my life at all. I don't talk to her enough. Sometimes she'll accidentally send me something on Skype, and sometimes I'll accidentally message her when I'm trying to message somebody else, and we talk that way. But that's it. And but I think the whole Japanese snow goddess thing may be kind of tagging along. And I think that possibly ties in with the desert fox. Now, so if it doesn't, then Ari, run a different direction. That's okay too. But anyway, guys, that is it. That's all I got for right now. And nice talking to everybody. And I will leave you guys to the soundbite of the dream. Adios, amigos. Dr. J out.
Thank you, Dr. J. My only comment is, well, first of all, yeah, I'd be glad to play that and add it to this. Although it was recorded before this particular soundbite, but time doesn't matter in the underworld, does it? I want to comment on the Yuki experience just to remind the listeners that in the past description in a previous podcast, Yuki represents, she morphed into a cat. So this is like a cat spirit, and it represents a navigation, kind of navigation of the unconscious, of life itself, of events in life, because when the road is slippery, Yuki takes over the wheel. That previous dream was, Jay was in the back seat of a car, or not the back seat, but in the passenger seat, and Yuki was driving, and somebody who interferes with his life was trying to wrestle the wheel from her. So this is part of that vampiric effect, maybe that interference. And the snow goddess, the cat snow goddess, is an intelligence that essentially helps Jay navigate through slippery slopes, through rough roads, let's say. And this is a rough road. So he has protection in a sense. And this isn't necessarily the dragon gen. There's other things because there's another recording after that because there's another being that Jay would connect to before he got into this work, and these are called the Majin. There were 9 of them. I don't know he connected to, but this is one of the reasons where I said, "Hey Jay, you can since you're dealing with this stuff already, you got nothing to lose by going this route." And it was true. So let me this account, like he says, is in the middle of the night, so he's very groggy, and it's almost like where is he talking from under the covers or from a cave, or but you can't, it's not incomprehensible. So listen up, and this is a very interesting dream. I'll have a few things to say about it. So he's going through a rough road, he's connecting to the world. This world has a vampiric influence that has its claws in it, you know, through the web itself, through the natural process of the web, it actually is hooked into him. So he can't tell the difference between what the natural web is, that could be all helpful and benevolent, and this other influence that's parasitic. So spiders may be a lot of things, but they're not necessarily parasites, at least not in the conventional sense. They're predators, but they're not parasites. At the same time, they do have a symbolic Earth Mother type or Earth Web connection. So let's look at this crazy dream that he had, because when he sent this to me, I thought it was a real event. I'm like, where the hell are you? What are you doing over there? But you'll see why. So, okay, Jay, I'll leave it to you, Dr. J.
Okay, so I'm camping, and I come across, I'm in the city, and I come across this rig. Looks like I've seen them before, but I don't really know what they do. It was like some kind of big crane thing, but it was like converted into like a camping vehicle. And it was pretty cool because it was pretty big inside. And maybe 6 people were camping in it, and these campers were also like, I don't know what they were, but they were, one looked like my student. That's why I was attracted to the camper, because it was a student that I kind of liked. But she had a boyfriend she was in love with, and I was like, okay, I think they're still together too. That was like 20 years ago. And okay, great, whatever. But anyway, I still like her. Jessica, that's her name. Anyway, I end up meeting these people, and I end up, they give me some night vision. We go out at night into what looks to be this graveyard, but it doesn't end up being a graveyard, but it's at night, and they're shooting guns, and we're in a kind of not a city, like a neighborhood of some kind, and there was this lady who had a really powerful fucking gun. But she wasn't in the group. She was just like somebody living in the neighborhood. And it was like a Gatling gun or something, and she had it mounted to the ground. And every time my side would shoot their guns, she would shoot her gun because she didn't want anybody to hear her gun. Maybe because it was like illegal or something. But she was shooting her house. I have no idea what the fuck's going on in this dream. But anyway, then
these guys find like some kind of small fighter jet. Had a really loud gun. It was a machine gun. They started shooting that, and that made the lady really happy because she just shoot her gun, because it was so loud. The jet's gun. And so anyway, we wanted to go grocery shopping. But the grocery shopping, because I needed some food if I was going to go camp with these people, a little extra food. And they needed a lot of food. But this grocery shopping little venture turned into attacking a gang that was in town or something like that. And everybody had something to do except me, and all I had was night vision. I didn't even have my gun or anything. And even if I would have had my gun, I don't have any bullets for it. So, and that was back at the truck that I think I left it unlocked, or at least I was paranoid that I left it unlocked. And so that's not good. And then in the plan, the weakest guy, who I think was Richie Cunningham in the fucking dream, the weakest guy was to run some kind of diversion. And so I thought I was going to end up being with that guy, but I looked too old to do it. It's like Richie was like this kid. And, so they just it was almost like they didn't want me involved at all, which was great because I thought this was a stupid idea to begin with. And then the dream ends. I wake up going, I don't have any bullets. Series of dreams of being unprepared.
Okay, so that's what you mean with the unprepared zone, too. Now, this dream is like a follow-up from the previous one and the visions, and yet it occurred before that. But it was sent to me almost like after that as an afterthought. But it kind of fits together because this dream is trying to say that you're involved with people that are their thing is the guns and approaching life in that way. So the guns represent something. They represent aggression. They represent an aggressive act of dealing with life in some manner. It doesn't mean physical aggression necessarily, and I don't think that's what it means here, but you're doing your thing like you are now. You're camping, you're living your life, and you run into people who have this modified rig. It sounds like something out of Mad Max or something, and some Road Warrior zone in a tamer version. But they have guns and you have night vision, which means you can perceive in the dark. You can perceive the unseen. You are more psychic. And they may have their own psychic abilities and perks, but you specialize in that. And you thought they would be able to use it. But that's not what they're about. So it's telling you, well, there are two categories of people. You're dealing with vampires and all of this, people who act like your friends, and maybe they are your friends, but at the same time, they benefit from you in a way that depletes you. That's one thing. And then there's other people who you get along with. Like you said, this is this lady that you liked and 20 years ago, and so it brought up somebody. Your subconscious is looking through your records and going, okay, here's somebody that you don't quite know, but that you've interacted with and that you like, but she was already somewhere else doing something else, not for you, so to speak, but somebody you could hang out with if you ran into them in some camping zone again. Whoever this group was, they kind of were of a similar attitude. It's almost like some dystopian zone where you run into a band of warriors that are out to do whatever they want to do. That's the dystopian aggression of a typical Road Warrior Mad Max type movie. Maybe not as extreme as the new ones, but like the earlier ones, or in a general sense. Now, the older lady, you were in some graveyard, which has to do with the past and has to do with the vibes of ancestors and has to do basically with this is how it's always been done. So this is nothing new. And the grandma with the Gatling gun was the most aggressive of all. It's almost like certain people are the ones that do the most psychic damage, and she was doing it to her house for some reason. So she was hurting herself or maybe wanting to eliminate. It's almost like defecating where you eat. Now, I'm not groggy and I haven't just woken up, so I'm going to leave all of Jay's F bombs in there. And that's fine because it's part of the whole atmosphere of how he was, conveying the situation. However, I would like to say that you're scanning the human collective and you're saying, okay, here's one type of person. This type of person can do the most damage. This is like an archetype of the crone, but not in a good way, not in the way of wisdom. Somebody who has a lot of oomph, but conceals it because she only comes out and is aggressive when she can hide behind somebody else. A kind of passive aggressive with a small p and a capital N for the aggressive part. And this grandma, however, wasn't the problem. It was some peripheral thing. The problem was you went to get some food, which is sustenance, which may be money, which may be getting a job, because the girl was one of your students, and the rat race and financial stuff and this and that. And these other people are very aggressive and they're, getting the work, getting on top, moving ahead as they have to, so to speak, as most people do. And they do it in a zone that's not benevolent. It can't be in this kind of reality all the time. So no matter how well meaning or cool you are, you kind of form a circle, or some people form a circle, their friends, their family, and from that circle, they engage with the rest of reality in a kind of competitive manner. It's not just in your work, but just your circle. Allies and enemies and things like that, allies and competitors. So some people can see the world like that, and many people see the world like that. It's called realism to most people. And you go and you find this gang and you have to like get their resources before they get your resources. And you can't engage in that behavior. Worthless. And you could be, because that's not for you. So it's not a matter of preparation. These others drag you into a zone that you don't want to be in. And that means it's possible that you might want to look for and that's why we do this work. So we don't have to fall into the general category of the currents of the human collective or other individuals where other people think is the right way and it's not for us. At the same time, we need to have enough discernment to know what the right time and the right place is so we don't make mistakes. So it is a slippery slope, and hence the Yuki image, the image of the snow goddess helping you. It is a slippery slope. Even the jinn understand that. So it's not a zone of what am I going to do now? Well, what you don't want to do is engage with these idiots. I don't know who the real people are. They're representations. So I say idiots because, yeah, from a point of view of a shamanic, engagement and the underworld itself, it's like, well, if you can avoid this and do another path, then it's probably in your best interest. So your preparation may not be for what you think it is. Your preparation might be to avoid what seems to be inevitable in the sense of not engaging with it, not being, because if you're prepared to be defensive, sometimes that will drag you into the zone. Yeah, I got all my guns and I got all my ammo and I got all my this and all my that. Well, that means you're going to use them, aren't you? Figuratively speaking, of course. But if you don't have them, then you'll be caught with your pants down, right? Well, not necessarily. You have other resources. You have the spider on your back, which you can actually utilize like a Spider-Man, like a spider shaman, like a web-connected individual, psychically speaking, shamanically speaking. And you also have your night vision, which lets you see into the unseen, which is your intuition, your ability to translate visions, to connect with not just a physical fox, but the spirit of the physical fox. That's there right where the embodiment is. It doesn't beat around the bush. Sometimes, like I said, these puns actually make a difference. They're actually part of the communique, so to speak. And it's an art form. So it's like, well, how do I interpret things? It's an art form. Sometimes you have a knack, sometimes you don't. And if you don't, you can cultivate a knack. It's not like some people, oh, I've read a leaf blew in front of me. What does that mean? That fell outside of the outside off a balcony and smashed 10 meters ahead of me. What does that mean? Why 10 and not 5? So that can lead to obsessive behavior, and you don't need that. So it is an art, and patiently, and Jay had an act with it for this art from the beginning, but at the same time, the jinn helped him cultivate a deeper connection. And don't underestimate this sense of discernment. Most people they're kind of cautious in life, and they have to resort or feel they have to resort to these measures that may not be in their best interests from multiple angles because they feel they have no choice. Their resourcefulness doesn't allow them another choice. So perhaps here, your resourcefulness, Dr. J, will allow you another choice, even if everybody else says that's impossible. As long as it's reasonable for you, then it's not impossible. Or you can test the boundaries of what impossible means, because that's what happens in level 3. You have assumptions that are collective level assumptions, and because there's many psyches backing them up, they have oomph behind them. Somebody's will is what the bullets represent. The power of will is the power to manifest your reality, and the power to act, and the power to have resources, and the power of this and that and the other. But at the same time, sometimes it's not the power of nature, which is what we need on our side. And I'm not talking just nature out in the wilderness. I'm talking the spirit of nature. So you leave this camping place where you really wanted to be connected with the natural way, the natural web, and ended up in an urban setting, which is an artificial type scenario. And this is where they would caution that maybe the vampirism is depleting you to the point that it's making you resort to things that you think you have to do, and yet you really don't. And so the anger comes in. And anger, the resentment is, why do I have to go through this crap? Why can't I do this another way? My abilities are for something else. And Richie Cunningham was the weakest one. So you don't even measure up to the weakest of these types of individuals because your strengths are in a different category, on a different level, and for different things. It doesn't mean that material things are out of your reach. See, that's part of the collective thing. Unless you engage in this collective level, unless you engage in this assumption, a collective level assumption, a normal common sense that life is tough and you gotta sometimes fight for what you want. You fight for territory because there aren't enough resources to go around. That's a common consensus. There could be. Really, if you think about it, there isn't any need for lack. We could sort it out. There's enough creativity, enough genius to make all of these wonders and send people into outer space, but we can't even get along, as some people say. And I know that's a cliche. But the thing is, we do have the resourcefulness to do this, to engage in a way that we don't have to compromise. However, we need to discover what that is for us. We need to test what our true boundaries are and what our assumptive boundaries are, the boundaries that we assume we have because they make sense in terms of our relationships with other people. And sometimes we cannot just jump into our true boundaries because we're not there yet. But it would help us to move in that direction. And that's part of what this work does. This work is I wouldn't call it humble. It is an adventure and it is fun. Like Jay will tell you in the last episode here, in the final words, because he does have some final words. I'm going to put that in as well. But in this zone, my recommendation with all of the patterns here described, because it's no coincidence, Dr. J sent me all of these things for whatever reason he thought he sent them to me. I look at the whole picture. I look at the patterns and the patterns in relation to the jinn and my experience of the jinn and his experience and how it all comes together. So I'm not saying this is definite, but I don't think I ran in a different direction than you, Jay. I think this is a direction you suspect and that will make sense to you. It's just that sometimes, oh, this is so realistic, these other people who I may give, who are cool people, in other terms, they're not psychopaths or criminals or enemies. In fact, they said, let's take you in and you can be part of the raiding team in this dystopian reality. And that is a kind of dystopian mindset. So we want our lives to improve. We don't want to subject ourselves into an inevitability of dystopia. We feel that sometimes the world is headed in that direction, but is there a way that we don't have to participate? Or is there a way when we can step back? Because those who choose to go to dystopia will go to dystopia. But the problem is, are we one of those people who will decide to turn our lives in a different direction, but not by denying the reality of this dystopian energy, but by discovering our own resourcefulness and how we can best put it to use to blend our sense of what the rules are with whatever this other thing is, so we can actually come to terms with navigating it, because you can navigate through it. You have Yuki. All of us have our Yukis in some way. And this is what the jinn help us with. This is what this work helps us with, to navigate reality, not in a kind of way that's going to give us lottery winnings and love affairs and all of these things that would basically drive us insane, because we can't process all of that. That's what happens to famous people sometimes. Without knowing, because famous people may have talents in one area or another, they submit to compromises that they can't get out of, and they sign the contract, so they have to go through it. The news is full of that recently, especially in the entertainment industry, shall we say. But aside from that, in our everyday life, well, how do I deal with it then? Well, I cannot tell you. I've been, relating to this stuff with Dr. J for a while, so I kind of know how he thinks as well. And we kind of have a connection through this common element of the jinn. But if you, and I'm not saying or promoting this kind of work, but there is inner work across the board, besides whatever I say, that can help you sensitize yourself to discover what your own resourcefulness is and where you can best apply it. And even the simple ways, because like somebody near and dear to me said, well, it's not so much the ability to manifest, it's also what you manifest and how to manifest the right things for you at the right time. And that's important. That's where vision is important. And yoga calls that vidya. It's a vision of your own awareness of who you are, and it's a vision of life, and it's the vision of putting the two together in the way that is functionable, that works. So you don't submit to life as it is presented to you on a crappy platter. You look at the resourcefulness, because the resourcefulness is meant to bring you where you can actually stand upright and walk through realistically. And the jinn promise abilities, and they promise many things, but these come in a way that is natural and stress-free, except for what you need to deal with, what you need to liberate yourself from, and how you need to extract yourself from a realm of unnecessary compromise, because compromise is a part of life, which means you negotiate between one thing and another, because the fact of life is relationship. You don't negotiate in terms of legalities and formalities that are predetermined so much. Many people like to think that way, but you negotiate a relationship like you do a friendship or an intimate relationship when you don't see eye to eye. And this negotiation is bringing the relationship back into harmony from the friction that it went into and what causes the friction. And there's no blame involved. There is a difference in initiatives, but sometimes that difference is caused by lack of vision and can be corrected in one way or another. However, in Jay's dream, he could not correct the vision with those other people because they were in their own zone, and that zone is not for him. He thought he could identify with it or go with it. So be prepared. Don't get caught with your pants down. The whole prep thing, and I'm not talking about the alternative type prep thing, whatever you think about it, and whatever I think about it. I'm talking about whatever life brings about. So let's see now how this develops and what the final soundbite that he sent me has to say. Okay, Dr. J, one more time, and then we can bid our tired fans, whoever they are and how many they are, a fond adieu. But for now, take it away again.
And one more quick little word before the sun goes down. Sorry for saying the F word a couple of times in the soundbite of the dream, because, I didn't plan. I wasn't in front of a crowd when I did that, so I wasn't prepared. But I thought, just the primal honesty of it would be one, entertaining, and two, this is real. It's not it's staged, but it's not that staged. So anyway, okay. I also took a nap today, but it wasn't a real nap. It was in that half in, half out space. And so I saw a quick vision of the, what do we call this guy? The Majin, or the Warai Hanya. So Majin is like, Majitsu is like in Japanese magic. So Majin, jinn is like a person or something. So magical person, but that's not very accurate. I thought a better translation would be Warai Hanya, which would be laughing demon. I had visions of that, way back in 2010, confirming that basically the genie, the Japanese genie that I summoned, what they call it in their language, is the laughing demon. And so anyway, I got a quick vision of him, and I haven't seen that guy in a long time. Now, I know he's around. He's just in the background, but I know he's around. So, because he stepped out of the background and showed his face, and so did some familiars influenced with genies. They were in the mix as well. But because of the laughing demon from Japan showed up, at least now, I think that the fox and Yuki, the snow goddess, is the Japanese snow goddess, is out here in the Sonora desert working with me in some way. Wow. What a trip. Okay, so anyway. And one last thing I wanted to say, which would be, just to not let it go. Ari and Tara, listen up, because you're probably going to be into this as well. Maybe, I don't know, if you don't have the time, that's okay. But teaching. Absolutely. If we ever end up teaching this system, I want to be in on that. A forum. I've had, on previous forums, I've met really cool people, but, they were cool at first. And then, I met Ari. I met Tara. So they're extremely cool, and I'm still talking to them, and maybe we could meet more cool people and we could teach, because it's worth, for if you're that type, this is 100% fun. If you're not that type, well, then you're not going to stick around anyway, and that's okay. But if you are into it, I'd love to teach this and, some other things. This could be a lot of fun. So anyway, I'm backing you 100%, Ari, because I remember you mentioning like a sound bite ago, or maybe 2 sound bites ago, about teaching. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you, in line, ready to go when the time is right. So there you go. Now, adios, amigos. Dr. J, out.
Thank you, Dr. J, for that interesting exposition. And we'll talk about the last bit in a moment. But for now, yes, you do have support, esoterically or psychically or internally speaking. You do have protectors and you do have advisors. So these are all telling you that, well, buckle up, because you're facing stuff and you do need to be prepared, but it may not be how you think it is, in the sense of inevitable conditions, or however the rational zone, whatever, brings in something that you have to fight against. Because rage is like that. It says you have to free yourself from this. You're being constrained. And the fox the same way. That's why you went out to the desert in the first place. You might say that these helpers um, called you there, and you needed it to get away from everything else, so you could be shown what's going on and what the issue is. Now, that being said, notice that you're not getting the protectors, and everything are not, that's one of the 72 jinn. They're completely different. They're your resourcefulness before you got into this. So it's almost like go back to the roots, summon all these guys up, reaffirm your connection with them, and you've done that essentially in the dreams. So you got the fox. The fox is a permanent settle thing. I would call it a settlement. It's almost like you didn't do a contract with it, but it's willing to guide you. And the underworld doesn't distinguish between settings. You don't have to be in that natural setting. However, you're connected with it anyways. And because you're connected with it, and because once Jay was telling me, driving out west through Arizona, I don't know where, but it almost seemed like the land or the rocks themselves were saying, hey, we need a shaman here. We need somebody, we need somebody who can perceive like you do. And sometimes you have a calling like that. And because your vision may be broader than just being in a certain locale, in that sense, because things are more global now, because of the level 3 zone, the fox is, call it a gift from the area, or basically, well, since you're that supportive, just as you are, you definitely need this this connection. Because back in the day, like back in the 90s, early 90s, in fact, I would be doing these New Age shaman vision quest things, but from a book, Shamanism and How to Do Your Vision Quest. And what is your vision spirit animal? And it was a fox. And I would see a fox in dreams. It wasn't silver or anything or connected, but that's also a message of saying, well, this is an astral presence as well. But the fox helps you get to the truth of the matter. It helps to dig where you normally wouldn't see something. It helps to enhance your so-called night vision. And it helps to find things that would not otherwise be found, symbolically speaking, of course. So ponder all of these things, and our listeners obviously, have a lot to chew on here, because we went through a lot of stuff, very condensed. But let me address the final point, the point of teaching. And although these podcasts are not for that, and even the extra videos I do is really not for that in any formal sense, I do feel that when properly organized, this information, it falls into its own category. So it's really not for people who are just into magic for what it offers in modern terms, or just into mysticism in the sense of contacting spirit, or religious mysticism only, and not just into traditions of alchemy or spirit summoning, it is known. This is a kind of creative connection, and I know many people shy away from that, the creative elaborations, especially modern ones, because who is anybody to do that? Well, everybody is anybody to do that. It's just that the people who end up doing it to a great degree are flippant about it. They don't take it seriously. They're not involved with it. They haven't gone through the, shall we say, the punches, the knocks. I don't even remember the phrase, but they haven't gone through the grist. Their mill hasn't ground up enough grain in life to just blow up another metaphor here. So it almost seems like you're making stuff up, and it doesn't really work that well because it needs to be processed, refined, tested, retested, and this has been that. And right now we're moving through how this works. So if ever I did do a form, it'd be like this, not really dream interpretation, but opening to zones where people can learn to read their own signs and move forward accordingly. And then as you do move forward, see, like I said in the other podcast, I believe it was the other podcast, when Jay and Tara are done with the full circle, we can move into a consolidating effect where, on the one hand, yeah, you can then summon the jinn for what you need them because the full picture is going to be in you and you'll have vibrated other things as well. And this full picture or fuller picture of integrity and alchemical accomplishment, or at least the accomplishment of cultivation of what these things transform in you, can reach a point where you can summon them with much greater effects. And if you don't have greater effects, you can actually realize why and how to correct that. Sometimes you're not meant to, because this is an economical system in the sense that you don't need the bells and whistles when you don't need the bells and whistles. Sometimes you do need the drama and the bells and whistles. But that doesn't necessarily mean sometimes you blow all your load, you spend your energy on bells and whistles, and you don't have enough for the real substance. So this is kind of for people who are practical minded with the esoteric and serious about it enough to it kind of merges the new age zone with the occult zone now, but there's no distinct. This is more shamanic in texture, so it doesn't have the white black distinction. However, it doesn't mean that it's relative. It just doesn't cut a straight line between them, and you cross that line. Yeah, there is a line, and that's where you engage in a hateful manner, whether you realize it or not. Because look at Jay, he's going through the rage and all of that, but he has to come to terms with it, not repress it, but understand it to know what his response is. The subconscious instinctive responses aren't enough. That's where the power lies, of course, in the from the subconscious, but your reasoning capacities are there, tempered with intuition. Your intuition is there, tempered with reasoning, and sometimes and you discern which is the one you need the most at any given time. Every case is different, but some cases are more similar to each other than others. So you have clusters of patterns and that you need to understand because you need to know yourself because that's the template. You are the template, and each of us is kind of unique. But if you have a disposition and a calling, this hasn't been offered before in the way that I am offering it or will offer it because it's not offered yet, because it's not really the right time at this time, per se. Actually go forth and say, I'm teaching this. Now, I'm 60 years old and I've spent a long time doing this stuff, but even back in the 90s, people were telling me, why don't you write a book? Because I always talked about, my impressions and what I know and how I know it and what I feel and what I've read. And when I was on forums, people were also urging me, write a book or teach a lesson or do this. And I'm like, no, I'll do some basic fundamentals of energy work. And I have put out stuff like that, not publicly, but I've given it to some friends and whoever wants it. I have some stuff to download on my Substack, but even that is just a sampler. Now I'm reaching a point of readiness and I have more systems. I have another system of esoteric application that is connected with sacred alphabets and runes and stuff like that. But that's also still cooking, you might say. It's almost ready, but this takes priority. And so we're cooking it with Jay and Tara. Maybe that should be the podcast, Cooking with Jay and Tara, but cooking not in the conventional sense. The nourishment is esoteric, shamanistic type of nourishment. It's psychic cultivation. It's cultivation of the energy body. It's cultivation of engagement with the life web, but it's also cultivation of knowing yourself. It's not a high spiritual zone per se, but in most cases, when you want to engage with life, sometimes the high spiritual zone takes you too far away from the ground, from ground zero, from the base, from touching grass, as they say. This does not take you away from touching grass. It doesn't leave you ungrounded or disoriented, especially if you care about being connected to the earth, to nature, and to the genuine. And I leave you with these thoughts, whether you agree with me or not. They're out there, and it is what it is. So eventually, yeah, Jay, we're going to do it. And we had opened up a forum, and that's on the back burner. That connection's still there. So who knows? And it's not to let's drag people into this. Let's summon, let's just fall for people. But eventually, if this stuff is, if people are attracted to it, yeah, why not? But people have to be attracted to it, and enough people have to be attracted to it, or at least it'll be a zone where whoever is attracted to it can engage in a conscientious manner without fanaticism, without dogmatism, but there is a structure to it. And it may not be free. Okay, so it's not going to be some costly thing, but it may not be free. It probably won't be free because, look, it takes a lot of effort. These podcasts take some effort. Doing all of this back and forth, especially engaging with people one-on-one, that takes a lot of effort. Who knows? We'll see. This, however, is offered for free. And my advice is to take advantage of that at least. And then you'll know if it's for you and if you can just do rudimentary stuff and see if you can engage or if it tries to scare you away or how it responds to you. But I'll be giving advice on that further down the line. Let's just get through what Tara and Jay are working through. And in between, because there was some mix-up and I almost didn't get Jay's sound bites till today, Monday. I thought I was going to get him on Sundays. So I was going to do a podcast just on my own describing the system in general. But until, for some reason, either one of them can't send anything because they're working through something or life intervenes, then I'll do that. Because we're playing it synchronistically. We're playing it in terms of how the events move. Because it's always, everything is a right place and right time. If you can dance with life in terms of right place and right time, and even sense that, and move in when you need to, and move out when you need to, then you don't have to shoot your proverbial symbolic, always, firearms. You don't have to be aggressive, but you can be proactive and you can be energetic and you can have initiative. But competing in that sense, competition is basically being who you are, expressing your merit, and then that being enough. Going and fighting for territory like some people do manifesting. For example, somebody comes and says, okay, I want to sell you something. And then the other one negotiates and then does some psychic thing to undermine your reason so you can't negotiate, some underhanded thing. There's plenty of things like that going on because it's a temptation. And frankly, we all have excuses why we must engage that way. I want to be better than everybody else. Not I want to be all I can be and all that I am. Not I want to be my genuine self freely expressed. No, I want to be better and have more. So, in comparison to everybody else, that has its place, but wisdom, and there is such a thing, can help us moderate that place and tune more because nature, shamanic wisdom especially, tells us that, well, you have, the spirits are willing, and they're not evil spirits. Many of them are tainted, many of them are corrupted, many of them are accessed through evil that affects humans first. Some of them have karmic evil. Some of them are malevolent as to who they are in their own way. Some of them are parasitic and, well, they might as well be malevolent. I don't care. Oh, it's just a nice little parasite. No, it wants to eat me. Eat me alive and not in a good way. Oh, I really need to get rid of it. I have an illness and it has microbes. I need to get rid of them, or else I need to put them into dormancy at the very least. So there are ways and means that do not cause issues or what some mystics would call additional negative karma. So I leave you with those thoughts, and those of you who have stuck around, thank you for doing so. Please check out the videos on YouTube. If you're looking at this on YouTube, if you're not, check them out anyways. Check out my Substack at acgeorge.substack.com. And my video channel has a new name. It is called Magus Wisdom Now. The Esoteric Survivalist was well and good, but I kind of got too cryptic with that. So I think Magus Wisdom Now is more telling because it broadens the scope a little bit. And the now is very special because the first, I talk about the Yoga Sutras there and the aphorisms of Patanjali. And the first word in those sutras is now. It says, now the teachings of yoga. That's the first verse. So now is special because it brings us into the present. It's almost like an esoteric invocation. It's an esoteric spell, spell casting, as Jay would say. So anyways, let me bid you a fond adieu. Thank you for listening. Till next time, Magus out.